A little while ago, I put out a YouTube short explaining the idea that I think that the DPS roles are kind of broken up into 4 soft categories, and these categories each have sort of counters to each other. And before I start launching into the explanation, I'm gonna go ahead and play that short to catch all of you up. So you're the type of person that insta-locks DPS and rivals. Yes, you are, don't lie to me. Well, if you're still stuck at a rank you aren't satisfied with, this might be why. There are actually 4 DPS roles, kinda, within the DPS role. Each of these are soft counters to one another, and balancing your team with a healthy blend of at least 2 or more is more likely to net you success. First off are the sustainers. Punisher is a great example of this. These are DPSs good at lots and lots of damage and are fairly good at tank control. Their positioning and flexible damage decently counters brawlers, of whom Iron Fist is the premier example. Brawlers want to get close and anchor the team's front line. These counter the flankers. Psylocke is our example. Flankers are great at finding separated targets for quick ganks to weaken the enemy's overall firepower. And of course, flankers counter pokers. Think Hawkeye. These are characters that excel at long range burst damage and offer good options against teams with lots of 250 health bars, such as sustainers. And we've come full circle. Most characters are a mix of 2 or more roles, so when you're looking at your team's composition, consider what you don't have and consider switching to it. I guarantee you will start winning more games this way. Subscribe for more. Okay, so the major question that I got, one of the leading questions that I got was, what do you think this character, insert character here, is? And that's kind of what this video is. So you guys got the basic idea. Hopefully don't need to explain that anymore. So I'm now gonna go over and I'm gonna talk about each of the characters in alphabetical order so you can kind of skip ahead through the video to find your specific character if that's something that you wish to find, and talk about what I think their breakdown is, right? And it's important to remember that these are just soft categories. These are not real things that exist in the game, but nevertheless, understanding how these characters operate can really help you select and choose a good DPS choice. It also, something I'll talk about towards the end of the video, can help you choose good characters for you to learn and master, because I think it's good if you're going to play DPS for you to have a bit of like a bouquet of different characters to learn, and some of them are going to be a little bit easier based on these categories. I'm hoping that all makes sense, okay? So, starting from the top, Black Panther. Black Panther is a flanker brawler. He mostly focuses on, of course, getting into the backline and finding squishies, but that doesn't mean that he can't deal some damage in the front line and, you know, kind of mix things up. That's definitely not his forte. I would even go so far as to argue that he's almost exclusively a flanker, but his increased health pool as well as his access to some mobility and escape options leads me to believe that he's sort of a pseudo category between these two. All right. Now, if you thought that was weird, I think Black Widow is a poker brawler. The idea here is that Black Widow, yes, of course, is a sniper. She's like the truest idea of a sniper that we have, of course, next to Hawkeye. But the thing that makes her unique is that her kit is built around her being in close range as well. It's a really clever design because obviously this helps balance out the sniper problem that plagued Overwatch for so long, and having her have those options for CQC makes her kit really interesting. Again, her secondary category is like not her primary thing. She's not actively going out of her way to do brawling above all else, right? She's a sniper that has some tools that also can allow her to brawl, which again, kind of unique. Next is Hawkeye, and I would say Hawkeye is like the purest form of just straight poke, right? He is nothing but range. He, of course, does have a tool in CQC, but he does not want anybody in CQC outside of like a moment to try to find a headshot. Hela is an interesting one because she's got lots of big damage at long range, as well as some escape options and a little bit of stun and some splash damage. She's got a lot of things kind of going for her, so I think that ends up putting her in the poke sustain category, and these actually are kind of 50-50 with one another. She has great long range burst damage, which does a really good job to squishy targets, but it's not instant. It's not like Black Widow or Hawkeye or whatnot. She has a very specific thing she's trying to do over a longer period of time, but nevertheless ends up giving her a unique kit. Next is Iron Fist, who I actually in the short said that he's a pure brawler, which I actually think is not quite right. I would say it's more close for him to be a brawler flanker, more on the 50-50 side. Yes, he can do stuff in the CQC right alongside the tanks and be right in the mix of everything else, but he finds a lot more value doing flanks alongside it. In fact, if you can flank with him effectively, he can be a little scary, especially in uncoordinated teams and quick play and such. Next is Iron Man. Iron Man's a little bit odd, but I ended up putting him in the poker sustainer category in that he, of course, has long burst damage at range, but he also wants to maintain that front line a little bit. He wants to keep damage on targets, and he doesn't have the ability to instantly kill something outside of his ultimate, of course. So this ends up placing him in the category that ends up setting him more up to do a little bit of both. Next is Magic, who I think Magic is much more accurately a pure brawler. She wants to be in the fray constantly 24/7. She's got lots of tools to be able to stay within CQC and deal the most amount of damage she can, get the most amount of value that she can. Magic is really good right now in the season. If you haven't picked it up, by the way, I highly recommend picking up Magic if you want like one of the more meta picks right now. And she's not too hard to play either. Learn some of her combos. There's plenty of videos out there, and she's gonna be great for you. Mr. Fantastic is a brawler, and he's unique in that he's kind of a tank, which isn't a category that we have here. Obviously, tanks we'll probably do on a separate video. If you guys like this, by the way, of course, subscribe if you guys are enjoying this video thus far. Maybe we can do this. I can grab some of my Grandmaster tank friends and my Grandmaster support friends. We could talk about those other roles as well. But yeah, Mr. Fantastic is a brawler through and through, and he has some weird, unique tools for tanking. But that for our categories here, we're just going to keep him in the brawler category and move on. Moon Knight. Moon Knight has great tools for breaking up enemies' backlines in a unique way. He doesn't flank, obviously, but he stops enemies from clumping up, right? If there's a team that's holding hands really close, the Moon Knight can do that. So I ended up placing him in the Sustainer category. I think it could be worth maybe exploring the idea of having like AoE as just a category, or just maybe like a checkbox or a modifier for some of these as like the ideas of these, right? But nevertheless, Sustainer does his job well. Moving on. Namor, similar idea, he's a sustainer. Great at establishing damage along the front lines. He can keep it at range. I actually considered placing him in the sustainer poker category because he does want to kind of stay away from fight directly. He wants to kind of let the fight come to him in a sense, right? And he's got tools for escape and so on and so forth. But for right now, I ended up placing him firmly in sustainer category. Of course, you guys can let me know in the comments if you have different thoughts and such. Psylocke I ended up putting in the short as a flanker, like a pure flanker. But I've got Psylocke Lord, and I didn't really believe that either. It was just for the sake of the understanding the ideas, right? I would say Psylocke is much more flanker sustainer rather than just pure flanker. She has all right damage up front and in the front lines, although that's not really what you want to do with her. Of course, you want to get into the back line. You want to find enemies who are away from their team, or a support who's maybe not paying attention for a moment, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean that she can't be alongside your other DPSs just simply pushing a tank over. She has tools to do stuff like that. So anyway, main category flanker with a little bit of a subcategory in sustainer. Scarlet Witch is a weird one. I ended up putting her in the sustainer brawler category. She needs to be CQC in order to make things happen. So that, of course, obviously puts her in a position where she wants to be along the front lines, or at least close to targets, but she still needs to be caught by the rest of her team. So sustainer brawler. Spider-Man, pure flanker. He has the best mobility in the entire game. He is by far the fastest, and he does a great job of finding somebody who's off and alone, taking them out quickly, and then moving on with the rest of his life. Squirrel Girl, sustainer poker. This one I think makes a lot of sense because she wants to supply lots and lots of damage against the enemy's team, while also not necessarily needing to be engaged in combat for long periods of time. She can really do a good job of picking off squishier targets in a flash, especially if something gets caught out. So sustainer poker. Star-Lord is actually one of the comments that ended up spurring this video. Sustainer flanker. He's got good damage and is able to pump it out relatively consistently. He's got tools for staying alive, and he's got mobility, so that also makes him sustainer and that flanker category. So he can do a little bit of both, but he's mostly going to be looking for just pumping out lots of damage, so sustainer. Storm. Storm is weird. Storm is kind of a support character in a way, and she wants to be close to her team, but her damage doesn't have drop off in the traditional sense. She wants enemies to be bunched up. I think Storm is one of the few times where you can kind of just say yes. Storm does a little bit of everything, and not bad at it either. There are other characters, even characters that we've mentioned thus far, who have really small representations in like a third category, but Storm, I believe, is one of the purest that is like perfectly split between all four. Kind of cool, actually. Punisher, pure sustain. Dude wants to be on a turret and a machine gun the whole time, pumping out as much damage as he possibly can. He's got tools for mobility to get in and out, but it's not going to disengage him from fight in the same way. It's more of just mobility from point A to point B. He is your Soldier 76. He is the purest form of I want to pump damage out. He is sustain. Winter Soldier, he is your Brawler Poker, which is cool because when you mix a Brawler and a Poker together, you end up getting like this weird offspring child of a sustain at the same time. Winter Soldier is really, really neat as in terms of his character design because he wants to be in a position where he can take advantage of his abilities, which are all kind of like melee-ish range, a little bit longer than melee range, of course. But he also has a weapon that does a lot of damage at really far ranges, sort of like how a sniper or like a designated marksman would work. So it ends up giving him this really unique blend of both being a brawler and a pseudo sniper or a pseudo poker, which kind of, when they're mixed together, make itself into a faux, like the tofu version of sustain. Really cool design. Winter Soldier, Brawler Poker. Hopefully you can understand why. And coming to our last on the list is Wolverine. Brawler and sustain. He wants to be anchoring the damage on the front line, but he also does a really good job of staying present and consistently pumping out damage. So you could argue that he's just pure brawl, but I don't know. I think he's got some unique kits that kind of like give him a little bit of category in the sustain as well. All right, so here's one of the ideas that I wanted to talk about. With each of these categories, agree, disagree, you can talk about it in the comments, of course. I'm not omniscient. I think that it would be wise, of course, for you to pick up at least one subtle representation in each of these categories. Whether that be picking up, you know, somebody like Magic who is pure brawl alongside the other pure other characters, sure. But just having, let's say, two characters that's like a brawl poke and a sustain flank or something like that is going to give you most of the tools you need to do what you need to do. And alongside that, if you're looking to learn a new character, it's probably going to be easier for you if you pick a character that has a subcategory that you already have mastered. So, for example, maybe you're playing Hawkeye and you like that kind of poke, you've gotten really good at those poke skills. Well, then it might be easier for you to pick up Winter Soldier because they have similar ideas. Like the way that they deal damage, the way that they get value is similar enough to one another that you can, the lessons transfer over. The musicians understand when I say you're playing piano and you go to a guitar. All right, somebody gets that? Anyway. Let me know what you guys think about this. Obviously, understanding these categories, the biggest thing you can take away from this is knowing how to counter your enemy. Because as you saw in the shorts, the sustainers are good at dealing with the brawlers against the flankers against the pokers against the sustainers, and so on and so forth. Of course, flankers are generally better at dealing with supports in the backline, sustainers are better at dealing with tanks, and pokers are generally dealing with the squishies, whatever that may be, typically other DPSs and such. So picking how you coordinate your team matters massively for this. So choose these characters wisely. I think this will help you out. I knew it helped me out because I ended up picking characters that I was able to understand and, you know, nail down these categories and flex as needed, even within my DPS role, to give my team what they needed. But like I said, let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this type of content, let me know. Subscribe, leave a like, all that other good stuff. Bless your faces, and deuces.